Hello, welcome to the virtual podcast. My name is Emily McFarlane. Today I've got two very special guests. Welcome to the land down under, Jesse Stanley and Oliver Zugel. How are you?
Good day to you. Thanks for having us.
Doing great.
Thank you so much for coming. I mean, apart from the obvious that Australia is the best, why are you guys here?
Well, apart from the obvious, we're here for kangaroo and all the other things that Australia has to offer. Yeah, we're here for the opportunity of medical cannabis in Australia. We've looked at the territory for quite some time, and Oliver has been here for quite some time and really talked us in as a brand to come down here and investigate it further. So,
yeah, we have been active in Australia pretty much since 2020 under white label. We were selling white label products here for a long time, and I always felt it was of the many geographies in which we're operating, probably one of the most well-regulated places, which, by the way, is often overseen by the Australians. They don't see it this way, but we think it's actually quite well-regulated compared to other geographies where we're in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, listeners probably can tell by the accents here. I'm joined by an American and a German. The jurisdictions, the regulations are completely different. And I imagine coming into Australia, I know we had a meeting with your team the other day and somebody commented, it's so strict here. Do you find that that's the case?
I do. In the U.S., where our programs in the medical marijuana may be viewed as the Wild Wild West, it's not as maybe hands-on. I think that's a population thing. There's over 350 million people in the U.S., and Australia is, 26 million people, something like that. I mean, California has 12 million more people. So it's a little harder to regulate the state-by-state operations, but I think it's a good opportunity for Australia to have a regulated market because I think a lot of black eyes come from unregulated markets or markets where they don't enforce the regulations that exist. And Australia doesn't have a lot of that. So you don't have as many as the bad players. I think people generally abide by the rules here, which creates good commerce, good business, and an opportunity. Without that, you can really look at other markets and be like, well, there is no opportunity there because there's a black market that exists and nobody abides by the regulations. So like Oliver said, I would say the same thing. I think the regulations are actually a good thing. It creates the opportunity.
I know, Oliver, Germans love rules. Australians the same. Love a good rule. Is that what attracts you to the Australian market?
No, as I said, I think compared to where we're operating otherwise in Latin America is much more strictly regulated than Australia. I mean, believe it or not, it's the origin of where we're growing and cultivating. But it's very hard to actually penetrate, get a prescription. It's only for a very limited amount of indications. I think it's significantly easier to do here. Even in terms of access, I believe here Australia, in terms of getting, if you are looking for a doctor and try to get a prescription, it's possible you can do that. And that's pretty much on par with Germany. So I would think that probably compared to Germany, Australia is still a little lighter regulated, but at a pretty similar level. So, but I think it has been done very sensibly, frankly speaking, and it should be done this way. And as Jesse said, I think regulations is a good thing, I think, for the business and for the patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you teach each other a lot. Obviously, you're the founder of Foliumed. Jesse, you're the founder of Stanley Brothers and also the co-founder of Charlotte's Web. What do you find are the best things that each of you teach each other, the synergies, and why you guys have come together and are bringing this to Australia?
Yeah, I think we're different for sure. We were talking today at lunch, actually, and I'm a creative by nature. Like, that's what I did at Charlotte's Web, and I'm from an operational standpoint, it's probably not my strongest suit, but like from a vision standpoint, operating a business, I really excel in that. But Oliver has that as well, and I think you wouldn't necessarily see that from his German side. You'd think operational type A type of person, but he is creative, and so I think we see eye to eye on that as the possibilities and the vision of the future. The other aspect is we've been in this industry for a long time. I've been in it since 2008, so I've seen there isn't a market that I haven't been a part of, whether it's the Wild Wild West, a super regulated, or even non-regulated space. So For us, I think we have a history of the landmines that are involved in the industry that a lot of people step on repeatedly. So I think we learn from each other pretty well, and we've stepped on landmines for sure in the past. But I think we complement each other really well.
And adding to what he says, I find it very, very inspiring to have him, who's a constant generator of ideas and new entrepreneur opportunities. And I, at the same time, as an operator, very often you can fall into the trap when you're just an operator to work within constraints. So you actually forget about the larger horizon at times because you're so constrained by what you're working with. So I think it's always a great reminder to not lose the perspective of where the opportunity actually sits. And I mean, the fact that he has been around in the business for 15 years in the US is at the forefront, and what I think the next frontier will be is always very useful. So therefore, I think the next line of products, what the medical science is saying, I find this always very inspiring. And I met him and his brothers 3 years ago, probably, and I think it was an immediate meeting of minds and hearts, I think, and I've never regretted it since.
Yeah, so you'd say it's love at first sight when you guys met?
No comment.
And so obviously Jesse comes from a very big family. You've got 6 brothers, 4 sisters. Is Jesse your favourite?
No. I'll answer that for him. I think John's his favorite.
I love the guys I have met. I think they're all pretty exceptional characters. I haven't met all of them, but I think the guys I have met I liked a lot. And as he said, John, him, Joel, I think they're all great characters.
Okay, everybody knows that every parent has their favourite. So I'll take that political answer with a grain of salt.
My mom doesn't have a favorite.
Yes, she does.
If she does, it's me.
See, this is what somebody who isn't a favourite would say, that their mum doesn't have a favourite.
Well, I would say that at the, to defend my brothers and sisters, but I'm definitely a favorite. For sure.
So you guys are all J's. It's like the Kardashians of medicinal cannabis.
Josh, Jen, Joel, Jesse, John, Jordan, Jared, Joy, Jay, Austin, Julie, and Jensen. Yeah.
You had to check.
No, I knew that was right. It's just I usually say it so much faster, but I wanted to make sure the listeners could get it all.
Go faster.
It's like the Goodwill Hunting thing. Josh, Jen, Joel, Jesse, John, Jordan, Jared, Jay, Austin, Julie, and Jensen.
I feel like this is what people should say before they go on stage. Just repeat it as fast as they can.
100%. Don't imagine people in their underwear. Just say my family's names.
And when is the reality TV show starting?
We have turned those down every year on the year.
See, this was a joke. I didn't know that this was actually a thing.
Well, actually, we did a show called American Weed in 2011 or 12 on National Geographic. So you can check it out. I think it's on Netflix. I don't know. But then we've turned them down since. They just, want to create drama. And my brothers and I fight. There's no doubt about it. But we're not like, the Kardashians where we're arguing over who stole our boyfriend. Or I don't even know what the Kardashians argue about, to be honest with you, but because I've never watched the show. But it would not be a good show.
What are you guys fighting about?
When we were kids, we fought over sports, and like the normal stuff, like just competition. But now I think we fight over, because we're all pretty involved in the business, what direction it should go. We're all very passionate people, and each one of us has our own lanes. And, I run the medical marijuana side and the mushroom side, and my brother's on the drug development side, my other brother's on Charlotte's website. So trying to work all of those things. They're different companies. You're going to have disagreements, and we have ours. But other than that, we don't really fight that much. I think the unique thing about my family, and people think it's weird, but I think it's weird when people are the other way. Like, we're very close. Like, my best friends are my brothers and my sisters as well. And like, we're close because my mom really raised us by herself. So whenever my youngest sister was born, my dad left. And it really created a need to, like, be close. So it was either we're going to be close and do this together, or we're all going to live at different homes. So for us, it's just always worked that way, where it's like, find an avenue, be good at it, and complement each other. So it's worked that way, and I think that that's helped us in business to, to lean on other people's strong suits and not try to control everything. So I'm thankful for that, for sure. I think in business, I try to operate the same way, where you empower people to do what they're good at, and you don't want to obviously micromanage people, but I think, Oliver brings another side with a lot of history in running companies, whether they're, publicly traded companies or whatever, highly regulated industries, which I think is very important on our side, the merger of the two, where I can maybe be a little more free will and he can be a little more, no, this is the way it needs to be. I think it complements each other. And as of yet, we've only had maybe 3 or 4 big arguments, so that's good.
Who started them?
He did.
So I imagine you guys have a similar ethos, though, when it comes to business. What would you say the most important thing is when coming together as Foliumed and the Stanley Brothers?
Well, I mean, it has to make sense for both of us. I think the opportunity Oliver laid out. So for us, it was, him talking to us about the opportunity and then leveraging the power of the brand. I think in business, for my brothers and I and the family, it's value people over profit. And if you can do that in enough numbers and create a big enough opportunity, then the profit will be there. So I would never do a partnership with anybody that didn't think that way. Obviously, numbers got to make sense, and you got to be thinking about those things. And the market really does, so that's why it works. But for us, it's in any of our businesses, it started as a mission. And so him seeing that, and we've had many conversations, whether it be in Spain, Colombia, wherever we've been, we'll stay up till the wee hours talking about how we can change the world, which is exactly, my focus, what I want to do. And I know that sounds like a Miss America competition answer, but I generally believe that.
Very true. So, I mean, when I met the brothers, as I said, was pretty much, I think for me, a meeting of mind and heart at the same time. They had been very inspirational for my own entrepreneurial ventures prior to this in the medical cannabis space. Myself, and I think the boys all have the heart in the right place. And so I think in my mind, this is kind of what keeps us together. So I think a shared mission and vision which goes beyond building a good business. That I think building good business is a necessity, but it's just a means to an end, and the end is something else.
Yeah, for sure. I know this isn't something that's come up yet, but I know that quality of product is something that's really, really important to you guys, and where it comes from, where it's sourced. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, he can speak to the product. I can speak to the origins of us. Like, we've always been vertically integrated. So we've called it from seed to self or seed to health. We control it from growth to product and shipping. That's really important to us because of where our origin comes from. I mean, we had to make sure the product was the same every time because little Charlotte relied on it. And, it saved her life. And then after that was another 15,000 people, 100,000 people, and all that stuff. So for us, it's very important to maintain quality and to control it, especially in this industry, because it's unknown cultivation practices. This isn't like corn or some of these other things. It's very intensive, the labor that goes into it and what needs to happen. And because of that, the marriage of the Stanley Brothers in Colombia really, and I'll let Oliver speak to that, really checked the boxes for us to be able to control the quality and to maintain a standardized product across the board so it's similar every time.
And I think for us there was an inflection point in the history of the company, which came, I think, 2019, 2020, when we started to create a joint venture with a German pharmaceutical company. And as you would easily associate with your Germans and quality, that's a pretty close synonym, I think, here. And they taught us, I think, also the hard way of what this really means from a, I think, very extreme pharmaceutical perspective, which I think is sometimes inappropriate when you actually think about a plant. But I think the training and the philosophy this instilled in terms of building a quality management system and putting quality very high up in the list of priorities, the Germans taught us this, and there was just no other way. We fundamentally needed if we wanted to do the deal with the Germans, we needed to either operate German pharmaceutical standards, or there was no deal. So I think we learned it the hard way, and it has become a cornerstone of what we do.
Yeah, I think a unique thing on is, people ask me a lot, and how to start a business entrepreneurial, because, when we started, it was just us. We built everything on sweat equity. Well, whenever you have minimal resources, you have a choice on your product. You can either put a bunch of money into marketing, which a lot of people do, which I see a lot around here, the same product, but just different brands, or you can create quality and let your product speak for itself. And that's what we did. We didn't, I don't know if we had a choice. We had to do that because it was saving people's lives. We couldn't be like, well, we got to make sure the package looks good. So it really, that was like second, third, fourth most important, even though I'm a brand guy. I love to build brands. For us, quality was the most important thing, because I'm not the type of person to put an inferior product out there and just make it look pretty. My brothers aren't either. So if it's not efficacious, if it's not a product that meets the market, and actually, to be honest with you, is leading the market, I'm not really interested in doing the product. So I think that opportunity and what you were saying with Germany and having to create standardization and a product that would meet their criteria is a good marriage.
And if you think about the most rewarding moments, in the history for me personally, of having been in the medical cannabis space, it has been always the conversation with the mother of. And when you have the conversation with the mother of a patient or a sick child, and they're telling you that your product, for whatever reason, is having this tremendous impact, which some other products don't, I always did find that to be really one of the most inspiring things during the journey. And the journey has not been easy, like for no one. For us, not for him, not for anyone else in the industry. And that comes from good quality, and it comes from consistency. And if you don't do that, you will not get that. And I think I'm taking a lot of pride, and my team does, to actually achieve that level of consistency where people come to us and say, this really works for my children. And that I think that really I find very valuable.
100%. I think at the end of the day, if you're going to be providing products that are going to be used by people in need, particularly children, you want them to work. You want them to be of good quality. So I completely understand that. You mentioned Charlotte a little bit earlier. Could you give us a little bit more around that story?
Yeah. I'll do this, and I will keep it to and maybe abbreviate it, because I always cry. Lately, I've been crying about it a lot because it's a story that's got different parts to it now. But my brothers and I met Charlotte and her family in the early 2010s, and it really pivoted our business. Before that, we were in the medical cannabis space, as Australia would have it, which was mostly cancer patients dealing with adverse effects of chemotherapy and pain and that type of ailments. So for us, we built our business around that, which was creating oils to give to people that were having trouble with appetite and sleep while going through chemotherapy. And Charlotte's mom, Paige, reached out to us because at that time we were breeding high CBD plants, which then nobody really knew about. But for us, it was less about the epilepsy thing. We didn't know anything about that. It was more non-psychotropic for some of these elderly people. I can't tell you how many 75, 80-year-old people we were giving cannabis to that, never really tried THC. And, they call you at 9 o'clock at night and they're like, I'm freaking out. And you're like, all right, Grandma, like, you guys, this will pass. And I always tell, our big thing was there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you'll get through this. But seeing that CBD created similar effects with some of the study and research that was out there, we went towards that direction of developing something that people could take at night or in the day and actually not be high. So she found out we were doing it and convinced my brother Joel to give Charlotte, at the time was 5 years old, this concentrated version. At the time, we called it the future, because we viewed it as the future of medicine, not just cannabis, but medicine. And Joel went back to us and said, hey, what do you guys think about giving a 5-year-old cannabis? She has Dravet syndrome, which was a very rare form of epilepsy, 300 seizures a week, but like drop seizures, big time seizures. And she had failed all pharmaceuticals. So in your mind, you're like, well, I mean, yeah, we could do that if something bad happens, because the doctors sent her home, like, do not resuscitate. Said, no reason to bring her back, just, let her pass. To her mom, and, no mom's going to take that and stop there. So credit to her. But for us, it was like, I mean, none of us really want to go to jail. But, we made that choice to do it, and she went seizure-free for a week after the first. And we're pretty excited about that, but there are things called honeymoon phases in drugs where it works and then it wears off. So the next week she did it again, another week seizure-free. At that point, we kind of had something, and started making the decision to get away from the THC and go into more CBD, because at that time it wasn't legal. You had a choice, and we could only grow so many plants. So it was, I would say from a vision standpoint, one of the biggest decisions we made was realizing that when this story gets out, there's going to be a lot of people that come for this plant. And so they did. Sanjay Gupta did an expose on it, and within a couple of weeks we had a 15,000 person waiting list.
Wow.
But we couldn't ship, so people were moving to Colorado to get it. And our rule on the wait list was, we will take you off the wait list, but only when we know we can give you product for life. So it was tough. We had a lot of parents coming, knocking on doors, saying, please move me up, offering money to move them up on the wait list. I mean, it's as I think about it, it's really a tough story. It's a tough position that these parents are in, and that and patients in general, whether you have a kid or not, and you rely on cannabis, especially in a market where it's not available. But then they legalized it, and those same parents that move it out to Colorado for their kids actually were the first people to help us hand plant our first farm in eastern Colorado, because no one had ever done this before, so we didn't have equipments and mechanization and machines to plant these plants. And I think that's that community aspect of how we built a business on the backs of my brothers, and the sweat equity there, but also the love and the conditional, non-conditional love that these parents gave their children, that they would quit their jobs, come out and help a bunch of cowboys plant cannabis in fields. And then that harvest was interesting, because that harvest, a lot of harvests in any other crop, they put up, and this might be too much information, but they put up hail screens. They put up all this stuff because they can't, they don't want it to fail, and then they put insurance against it. But we couldn't do that. So this crop had to be successful, period. Had to be. If it wasn't successful, we were done. And it was. And I think that that's an energy thing. I think that that's the love of parents, and I think that's why our story has resonated and why it's been so powerful. There's a lot of love that comes in to our products, and I think it's in the cannabis industry. I can say that, like, our history is that, but at the same time, there's a lot of greed in the industry, and so it's been a tough line to stand on your morality in a business and go back to what I was saying, which is value people over profit, especially whenever you start getting, big time money into it. So for us, I think that's a unique opportunity in Australia, is to go back to our roots, where we're at, and be a mission-based company that has one goal in mind, is to help people. And I think we can do well by doing that.
Yeah, I think what you said actually about community really resonated with me working at Virtual. Something that we think about every single day is bringing communities in to businesses and helping them grow together. And I think it's kind of perfect that you would come to Australia, come through Virtual to do something like this and bring people on board who really believe in the product and the service, and have those people backing you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's funny actually that this became an opportunity, because I think maybe 3 years ago I went to Joel, my older brother, and I said, I think we should be the first company to crowdsource a drug. And he, now we're actually in the process of doing something similar for a psilocybin drug we're doing, and then a few other things in the States, which are actually doing the clinical trials here in Australia. But I feel like the community, I feel like people should own more. we need more stakeholders. We need more shareholders as opposed to just VCs and some of these other groups. And I think that people can be proud of owning something that, you know, makes a change, and you give that opportunity to people. So for us, you're spot on. Like, the community is what makes things go, makes things grow, and we don't ever want to lose sight of that. So it's a really good opportunity to connect with what you might call the commoner in Australia, but that's who we are, you know. So it's we appreciate obviously you guys' help, and then also what you guys are doing is making that available to people to be stakeholders and shareholders in companies that really matter.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's the beauty of equity crowdfunding, and it's growing and growing in Australia. Absolutely. I know it's been around in the US for quite some time, in the UK as well. It's huge, and for it to be growing here is really, really exciting, and to have companies come in and want to set up shop in Australia is awesome. Like, you've made such an impact on a lot of people in America to come here, and I'm sure you've had a look at the Australian companies doing similar things, growing Australian cannabis. Where is yours grown?
Well, we grow our cannabis in the highlands of Colombia, 2,500 meter altitude. Pristine air conditions, very high UV index. So when you walk out into our fields, you better wear a sunscreen protector, because after 15 minutes it becomes, me as a German guy, it become red like a tomato. And we selected a location. Most people would think that Colombia is a jungle and there's lots of humidity and high temperature. That actually isn't the case. Bogota sits on a high plateau, 2,500 meters high. Average temperature there's about 15 degrees. And that is just the ideal way of where and how to grow cannabis. So you have less pests, you have less humidity, you do not need energy to actually heat or cool the greenhouse. It's ecologically sustainable. And we have a workforce there. Colombia, few people know, is the largest producer of ornamental flowers, of roses in the world. I think they are close or have beaten the Dutch people on it. And so there's an extremely skilled labor force around who's dealing with perishable goods, with ornamental flowers, where the logistics and delivering the product on time for Valentine's Day in a Denver supermarket is absolutely fundamental. So I think the combination of all of this, I think, led us to set up shop in Colombia early on, 2018, and has taken us ever since a long period of time to learn how to do it right. And we were very privileged to work with the Stanleys and other people from the United States to get this up to speed. I think over the last couple of years, never regretted it. We absolutely are convinced that 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, Colombia, as in coffee, will be powerhouse. I think we have no doubt about it. Amazing.
So I know there's a lot of misconceptions around medicinal cannabis. What would you say the most common ones are, and probably what are the most amusing to you when you hear it? You know, you're just in shock. You want to educate people. What do you reckon are the biggest ones?
You know, I hear them less in the States because people have really embraced it. Here, I think the common, gateway drug is always a funny one. I'm like a gateway drug to Funyuns and, maybe pre-diabetes, but it doesn't really cause any problems. I think the tough one for me is I'll actually say the opposite side of it, is that it works for everything. I think that's probably the most does a disservice to the plant. I think it does a disservice to the industry, because nobody's going to believe that. I mean, if you look at the science of it, and the reality is that our bodies have an endocannabinoid system, which is the largest cell receptor system in our body, which is relatively, unstudied and rarely newly discovered. And the unique thing about that is that there are other cannabinoids out there that are in other plants, but cannabis has the most of them, and it's prevalent in the flower. So it has a synergistic and an amazing relationship with our bodies. It's why it helps a lot of indications, because most diseases fall into a category of inflammation or neurological. And our receptors are all in those specific areas. So I think it helps with a lot of stuff. It is not a panacea. But I do think the just because it helps with so many things, I think it should be a first option, not a last option. I think that it's often criminally underrated for even the smallest things that people should definitely be taking, I think, on a daily basis. And I'm talking about CBD, but even just getting your cannabinoids in. But I would say the answer on my side is definitely that people would call it a panacea. It cures this, cures that, and all those things, which it absolutely could. We need the research on it, but just boilerplate making those statements actually does more harm than good, especially in the medical community.
What I always found kind of bewildering is that if you look at the demographics of the majority of cannabis users, typically quite progressive socially, I think, and therefore also I think environmentally sensitive to sustainability arguments. I always was struck, and my first cannabis company was in the US, and so therefore I'm very familiar with how cannabis is grown in the US, which is mostly indoors with LED lights, a lot of electricity, air conditioning. I was in Las Vegas, summer temperature, 50 degrees Celsius, so there was a lot of energy going into it. I find it really interesting that the consumer of cannabis would not pay attention to that they wouldn't realize that actually the way the plant is being grown currently is like growing coffee in an indoor environment with that's actually economically really unsustainable. And
right.
The carbon footprint of it is horrible. I mean, you think about the amount of energy which goes into these places, whether it's the LED lights, whether it's the air conditioning. I mean, it is really quite shocking. And people would not either not know or not care, which I find bewildering looking at the demographic base of the patients which you're dealing with. So I always was kind of pretty puzzled by this. And I think we're just now with the Colombian grown, sun-grown flower, I think we will be changing that perception. And I think that will be do something good for the environment. And me as a good old German, I mean, I do care about that stuff.
I think that the unique thing about the industry and where it's at now is the growth of it, is because it's still pretty, in the new stages of growth. And, like, nobody drinks moonshine. Nobody drinks moonshine. But it came from overregulation. It came from underregulation. And whenever you overregulate something, you make something illegal. That's what makes people take plants and put them into warehouses where they can grow it and mask the smell and all that stuff and hide it. And I think that the industry is coming, it is in other places, but it's coming, for lack of better terms, out of the closet and into the mainstream where people can really understand it. And I think the sourcing aspect, I agree with you. I think that will change and people will go away from, well, I want the highest THC possible, and it'll go back to, your bourbons and like things that taste good, and it's not all moonshine, like, because that's really where we're at right now is people want these molecules so high, but that's not natural for the plant. And I think that's our commitment as a business is like, look, we're from a vision standpoint, like I want to, we call it in the U.S., skate to where the puck is going, hockey reference. But
Canadian, it's Gretzky, I believe. I think it's Canadian.
Well, yeah.
They'll hate you for it.
Okay, but then, the U.S. has all the hockey teams.
Is this going to be one of your votes?
Yeah, exactly. I don't care about hockey, to be honest with you, but it was a good analogy. But I think that's for us is like, I want to get the industry and I want to row the boat to where the industry is supposed to go, which is understanding, which is acceptable. And to me, that is, education and explaining about the plant, because the plant can only carry so much. And if all it's carrying is THC and terpenes, then it's missing out on so many of the other medical, cannabinoids and molecules that are in it. So for us, I think I'll meet the market where the market is, because you have to, and then row the boat to where the next spot's going to be. So that's our commitment, is on science and innovation, and to take products that are more efficacious and have better conversations with doctors and researchers and the like, so that we can take away, to your question earlier, like, what are the funny things, misconceptions or stereotypes about cannabis? Well, I'm here to break down all those.
I know there's obviously a few different cannabis products. Can you give me a brief overview of the difference between them?
Ours specifically?
I mean, sure.
Or cannabis products in general?
I mean, if you think about CBD, I was thinking about THC, all of these different products, people get a little bit confused.
Yeah.
Why do you think they get confused? Do you think it's a lack of education there, or do you think that...
I think it's a lack of education, but I mean, it's hard to educate everybody on it. There's over 100 molecules in the cannabis plant, and we know, in the U.S., we know a lot about a lot of the other minor cannabinoids. Here in Australia, the common ones are THC and CBD, but I'm not even going to bore everybody with it, but there's CBN, CBC, CBG, CBDV, THCV. There's so many, and they all have different trigger points in the body, and they all have different reasons to exist, CBN being one for sleep. So our product specifically, like I said, we won't go into all of those straight out of the gate because it would, I think, confuse the customer. So for us, our job is to increase education and awareness and offer those by way of research. So that's one thing that my brothers and I do very well is we research these things. We partner with universities, and so that we can better understand what a minor cannabinoid might do, then we can come out with a product with it. And so like CBN, the Charlotte's Web just launched a CBN sleep product, but they did a 1.5 year research behind it so they could know what worked. And I think that's the unique thing with our company is we have a lot of knowledge there that other companies don't have, where they just say indica for sleep and sativa for energy, which, that was like 1995 when people were saying that. And it's where the market is now, but it's not necessarily true. So there's so much that goes into it. And I hope that we can pioneer and help steer the knowledge base to get, larger around cannabis here with our products and the information that we bring.
Now we're really circling back to our discussion at the beginning about Australia. Why do you think it is the next frontier?
So I'll speak on my side, and Oliver probably has a different answer, but I could say, my brothers and I are doing clinical trials here currently. We just finished phase 1 on a drug for autism that is CBD, and it's botanical. All the drugs that we'll bring to market will be botanical based, not synthetic and isolates. The other drug we have is a psilocybin drug for depression, anxiety. And then we'll do a THC one, and we'll look at other plants that deserve the pathway of physician advocacy by taking it the drug route. But because we're doing that work and research down here, we thought it was, a good market that was open to it. And it's not necessarily overcrowded. And frankly, to be honest with you, I view it as an opportunity because I think there's a lot of help we can do from an education standpoint and getting this market to the right spot because, let's be honest, a lot of industry and industry leaders sometimes don't want things to change because they have, the majority of the market share or whatever. And that's not really our goal. Our goal is to grow the market. The market is a fast-growing market, and we're seeing that in the analytics. But we think it can grow larger. We think it can help people understand it. And I think that it opens up, the north part of the eastern part of the world, right? So I think there's a lot of influence Australia has. So as they grow, I think maybe we can grow Japan, China, and some of these other markets. But it'll start here. It starts in the places to put out the research and to regulate it properly so that if people think, well, if we put in a medical cannabis, is the sky going to fall? And I can tell you it hasn't yet.
So me, from a business perspective, when I look at entering different markets, and we have been operating, I think, in 9 different geographies until now, including Germany, Israel, a whole bunch of South American countries. Fundamentally, what I'm looking for, that's where we, again, started the conversation. I look first and foremost whether there's good regulation. And I strongly believe that Australia has good regulation, could be improved as always, but I think it has been done, I think, very pragmatically of what's on the table here, and I'm a big supporter of that. So this is probably the most important piece. Second one, is there sufficiently of a market size for this to be relevant in Australia by now? Yeah, after Germany, pretty much at par actually with Germany, which very few people know. Okay, so it's one of the top medical markets worldwide, and I think many people don't actually appreciate that. So your size is actually quite relevant. Yeah, will be ultimately probably overtaken, of course, by Germany and by Brazil, but for the time being, it's actually a very relevant piece of market. So thirdly, I will look at the competitive structure. What does actually the industry look like, and do they need something like what we offer? And I think this industry here has come to a stage where there's an excess of product names of very similar and identical product, and where as a doctor, as a patient, you need to become an expert in reading certificates of analysis. So you need to start educating yourself about CBC and CBN and the terpene level and what is, and that's totally unnatural. I mean, tell me any other medicine or consumer product where the prescriber / would need to go through an exercise like this. This is totally unnatural. And we're detecting that frustration when we speak with doctors a lot. They say, like, listen, I've got so many people, I have MSLs coming down every day. They tell me that their product is better and has 3% terpenes, mine has 2.8. And I think now coming to a stage where the medicine is accessible. You can get the medicine, I think, through your prescription, online telemedicine. It's relatively easy. But selecting has become the issue. I think by now we're at a stage in the industry where access has been quite nicely resolved. I think now we're, coming to a different problem, which is there's too much product around, looks all the same, and the consumer needs to do a PhD in chemistry to actually figure out which product is better, and that cannot be the case. So there is going to be the emergence of a brand, inevitably, if we want to grow the industry from serving, let's call it 500,000 patients, to be serving 3 million patients. And that simplification will come through the emergence of a brand which is trusted by people without them needing to read certificates of analysis. And that will ultimately happen. And I think we're well positioned based on the history of the company to make precisely that happen. And that's, I think, where the puck is going. And I think that's why we're here.
Yeah, I mean, not to speak on behalf of the entire of Australia, but we're excited to have you here. Very excited. And I think it's a good place to end it here. But thank you guys so much for coming. We're really excited to have you on the virtual platform and really excited to see what you guys can bring to the landscape of medicinal cannabis here in Australia. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.